Hey everybody, welcome to Chapter 4. We're starting off Chapter 4 with Lesson 4-1, which is about congruent figures. So let's talk for a minute about what makes congruent statements so important and so special. It says this in the first line here, that order matters. Order is everything here, and we can rely on the order to tell us what is congruent to what parts are congruent to what. So this starts out saying, given that ABCD is congruent to QRST, find corresponding parts using the names, and order matters here. For example, if you line them up, ABCD and QRST, the first letters correspond, which means angle A corresponds to angle Q, so those two angles are congruent. And you do the same thing with segments. So B and C are the second and third letters, R and S are the second and third letters, so segment BC would be congruent to segment RS. You can completely go by the order of the letters here. So we are going to work through these exercises. This should be a much shorter video than our normal videos. I know we're all hopeful for that, aren't we? Okay, so here we go. Starting here with our exercises. It says to find corresponding parts using the order of the letters in the name. One says to identify the remaining 3 pairs of corresponding angles and sides between ABCD and QRST using the circle technique shown above. Okay. The remaining 3 pairs. Oh, I see. So they identified one of them. They identified A congruent to Q. So we're going to identify B congruent to R. That's angle B congruent to angle R. We're going to identify angle C congruent to angle S. And we're going to identify angle D congruent to angle T. And I really think you should really write these out too. So we can say angle B is congruent. Maybe we not write them all out to angle R, because that might be a little bit of a lengthy process. Here we have angle C congruent to angle S, because they were both the third letters in their names, and angle D congruent to angle T. Okay. Sides are going to work the same way. Let's go ahead and switch colors for this one. Sides feel like blue. Okay, so you can see in the example here that they chose the second and the third letters. So if we chose the first 2 letters, then we could say that segment AB is congruent to segment QR. Okay, so we can say segment AB is congruent. Make sure you put that little line over AB so you're talking about segment and not its measurement. AB is congruent to segment QR. All right, okay, so we have AB to QR. Up here they did BC to RS, so we can also do CD to ST. So this one says CD congruent to ST. Put your segment marks over the top of both of those segments. And then this last one, so we've got the 1 and 2. Up here we had 2 and 3, and here we have 3 and 4. The last one's going to be 1 and 4. So you can connect them in some way, AD and QT. Because it's hard to circle them or using a circle technique there, that's definitely going to be the hardest one to show. So on number 2, it says which pair of corresponding sides is hardest to identify using the circle technique. Well, that would be AD. Congruent to QT, because it's hard to draw a circle around the first and the fourth letter on both of those without it looking super messy. So I didn't draw circles. I just drew a little arch. Can y'all tell that's looking a little arch? These 2 are connecting, A and D. And it looks like it's over the whole thing. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is saying AD congruent to segment QT. It's a better Q than the other one. Okay. All right. So looking at corresponding parts by redrawing figures. Number 3 says the 2 congruent figures below at the left have been redrawn at the right. Why are the corresponding parts easier to identify in the drawing at the right? So if you'll notice, they have taken F, G, H, K, and they have flipped it over so that the same sides are in the same position, and they kind of straightened up ABCD too. So notice they're turned different ways in the first one, and here they're turned the same way. So it's easier to identify which parts are congruent, and we can actually indicate congruent parts using our slashes for our corresponding sides. So AB then would correspond to FG, And you can see that CD here corresponds to HK. And you can see that BC corresponds to GH. And you have one more down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. AD is congruent to FK. So when you mark these figures all up completely, it can look like quite the jumble. So, but still it's worth doing. Okay, so if we did the angles the same way, we just have to put a different number of curves on each one. So angle B would correspond to angle G. We could say C corresponds to H. We could say K. I'm just going to put a slash through the curve on this one. Corresponds to D. And those are congruent. And we could say that A, I'm going to go with 2 slashes through that curve, corresponds to F. So when you're looking at two figures and it's all marked up, you're going to match up the same symbols, the same markings, to see which part is congruent to which part. Number 4 asks us to redraw the congruent polygons at the right in the same orientation. Oh man, this is going to be a test of my pen skills here. All right, so let's go with green here. All right, so we have ABCD and ABCDE and PTSRQ. If I drew one inside the other, that might make it a little bit easier. So this shortest side here, hopefully you can see matches up with that CD. This would be a whole lot easier if we could cut these things out and put one on top of the other, wouldn't it? Okay. So if I turn this thing around, this SR is going to sit right here. So this is going to be S, I do believe, and R here. Okay. And the angle that looks closest to a right angle is angle P. Oh, and I'll swap those letters around. This is going to be Q, which is actually going to make that R, and this S, and that one's going to be T. Okay, so let me go back and fix that, because my R and my S are in backwards places. Okay, so my R's here. This one's R, this one's S, okay, which makes this one T, and this one P, and this one Q. So if you can label one inside the other, then you can easily see, okay, well then A is congruent to P, B is congruent to Q, C is congruent to R, D congruent to S, and so on and so forth. So identifying all pairs of corresponding sides and angles there, the angles you can see pretty clearly, A and P, B and Q, C and R, D and S, and T and E. So for the segments, I'm going to slash those. So CD here and RS, I can see that those are going to match up the same. I can see ED matching up to TS. I can see EA matching up to TP. Probably should have changed color. And you could do 4 here, or you could do like a squiggle. I'm going to do a squiggle. Okay, and then we got BC. Let's go draw an arrow to it, corresponding to QR here. So you can list all of those out. And I can actually do that in text, but they won't have the little lines over them. So I can say angles, or congruent angles, A and P, B and Q, C and R, D and S, and E and T. And then about our congruent sides, and these are corresponding. So congruent sides are going to be AE and PT, AB and PQ, BC and QR. Remember, order matters here. CD and RS, and then one more DE and SD. Probably should have used the ampersand more there, so I wouldn't have got all scrooched up there. Okay, so number 5 actually labels the figure, or gives us a congruent statement. Congruent statements are just super, super helpful, because we can use those congruent statements to tell us. We don't even need the figure. We can use the congruent statements to tell us exactly which parts are congruent. So here we have MNOP congruent to QRST. Identify all pairs of congruent sines and angles. We don't even need the figures. We can just use the statements here. For instance, M and Q are both the first letters, so I can say angle M is definitely congruent to angle Q. I know that to be true because of the congruent statement, which means angle N is going to be congruent to angle R, and angle O is going to be congruent to angle S, and angle P is going to be congruent to angle T. Corresponding parts are congruent. Add my symbols in here. And you could mark them on the figure if you wanted to. And if you want to do the segment, same thing. The first two pieces, M and N together, are going to match up with the first two pieces here, the first two letters. So we've got segment MN is going to be congruent to segment QR. Okay. And then we have NO congruent to RS. And we have OP congruent to ST. Then we have the first and last letters MP congruent to QT. So if we mark these on the figures, then we can see kind of how they would need to be turned in order to show them corresponding in the same positions. I don't know that I'm going to have enough room to write the symbols here. Oh, I'm going to make room. Make room. Okay. I'll make this look better. That should be curvy, and this should be curvy. Okay? So we have MN congruent to QR. MN congruent to QR. And we have NO and RS. So NO right here, and RS right here. And then we have OP and ST. So here's OP and ST. How about I just leave the other one unmarked? And then that matches also, doesn't it? All right, and you can put curves on the angles if you want to, but this is a pretty tiny figure, so I want you to be able to still see the shape, and I don't think you'd be able to if I wrote all over it. Okay. All right, so here we have another example and then a few more exercises. So the example says, given triangle ABC, congruent to triangle DEF, and it gives you some measurements. It says if angle A is 30 degrees and angle E is 65 degrees, what is the measure of angle C? So first of all, there is a letter missing here. So let's add that in first. Okay, there's a letter missing here. This actually is angle A, and it is not labeled on our worksheet. So there it is. It is now. Okay, so let's put some other measurements in place here. We can go to text here. It says if A is 30. Well, given the congruent statement, A is the first letter and D is the first letter, which means they're going to be congruent. So if A is 30, then D is also 30. Okay, so that's 30 degrees there. So look at this 65 here. The 65 is E, and E is the middle letter, and B is the middle letter. So E must be congruent to B, so B must also be 65 degrees. So now we can use the triangle sum theorem to find the measures of angles C and F. Okay, so it says A and D are corresponding parts of the figures. I'm wondering, oh, it is. This is walking us through this, so this is going to be quick. What angle in triangle ABC has the same measure as angle E? We already did that. That's going to be angle B. Okay, let me change the color here. Told y'all this is going to be quicker. Y'all believe when you see it, won't you? Okay, the angle in triangle ABC that has the same measure as angle E, well, that's going to be angle B. Angle B. And then what is the measure of that angle? Well, it says 65, so we're going to go with 65. Add the information to your sketch. Done. We've already done that one. Check. Okay. 7 says that you know the measure of two angles in triangle ABC. How can you find the measure of the third? And, well, we already know that. We know that's triangle sum theorem. We've done the triangle sum theorem. So we're going to use the oops, I don't need all caps. Triangle sum theorem. Okay. That didn't need to be capital. It's okay. So the triangle sum theorem, and we can do the math here. So to find angle C, then we can say 30 plus 65 plus the measure of angle C equals, and what's the sum of any three angles, or three angles of any triangle? Yes, that is 180. So when we simplify that, Then 30 plus 65 is, of course, 95 plus the measure of angle C equals 180. Okay, and then we're just subtracting, of course, I went from here up there because I ran out of room. I'm subtracting 95 from both sides. Subtract 95. And again, I'm going to do this a little bit conceptually, so hopefully you can follow what I'm getting ready to say. Green. Of course, 95 minus 95 goes away, and on the left side, all we have left is the measure of angle C equals 180 minus 95. Well, 180 minus 90 is 90. If I take away 5 more, then I've got 85 degrees. There's that mental math process. Okay, so what is the measure of angle C? 85 degrees. How did you find your answer? Triangle sum theorem. Now, if angle C is 85 degrees, then what is the measure of angle F? Hopefully you know that that also must be 85 degrees because of their measurements and because of their congruence. Angle C is congruent to angle F because of the congruent statement. So this is before writing a proof, add the information implied by each given statement to your sketch. Then use the sketch to help you with exercises 9 through 12. Okay, so I do believe that this set of instructions here goes with what's underneath it. Okay, add the information implied by the given statement. Okay, so number 9 down here says that angle A and angle C are right angles. Well, if they're right angles, then we need to mark that in the figure. We need to, oops, let me go to writing. We need to write that in the figure. Angle R and angle C are right angles. Okay, so the implied information here is that those angles are congruent, right? So angle A is congruent to angle C. If they're both right angles, then we know they are the same measurement. So number 10 says that segment AB is congruent to segment CD, and segment AD is congruent to segment CB. So we can mark those in the figure. It says AB congruent to CD, so mark it. I have AB congruent to CD, same number of slashes there, and AD congruent to CB. So here we have AD congruent to CB. Okay, so we've marked that in the figure. Now, it is also given that angle ADB, remember the middle letter points to the vertex, so angle ADB is this angle right here, okay? ADB is congruent to CBD, angle CBD. So that's going to be this angle right here. So I'm putting the same curve on those two angles. Okay, so we've marked those in the figure. And it says, can you conclude that triangle or that angle ABD is congruent to angle CDB? So we want to know, can we conclude that this third angle is also going to be congruent? Okay, so can we conclude that this angle right here is congruent to this angle right here using the given information above, and if so, how? Well, the triangle sum theorem tells us that all three angles of any triangle must add up to 180. So if these are the same and these are the same, then the third angle must also be the same. Okay? Can you conclude? Yes. Triangle sum theorem. We're going to use triangle sum theorem. You guys didn't know how useful that theorem was going to be, did you? Triangle sum theorem. I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay? If two angles of a triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle, then the third pair of angles must also be congruent. How can you conclude that this third side of both triangles is congruent? Because the sum of both of the triangles must add up to 180? Because sum of angles of any triangle is 180. Okay. All right. So there are also two other videos out there on Canvas that help you through a student companion, and then another piece that helps you even further with this lesson. I encourage you to really watch those so you can understand even more about what's going on in this lesson. There's different information in those also, but this should help you at least through the reteaching if that is what your teacher is requiring. Thank you so much, and we will get this posted to Canvas for you.